All right, so a lot of things there. Okay, tons of stuff in the core stuff. So let's have a look at some of that. All right, so here's Creo 8. Looks very similar to the other Creos. I know some of you on the call today are already using that. Okay, but let's have a look at how it looks. I'm just going to open up this model here on the screen, and we'll point out a few things. So um, doesn't look that much different. Still got the same ribbon and other UI bits that you all know and love. So some changes that are here. So you can see our datum planes, how they're shown that they're filled in, shaded. As I highlight them, you can see that shading to show that more clearly. Okay, if I want to change that, if I go into my options, okay, go into my entity display, you can see here whether I should display them as shaded or not. Should I have the color fill, what percentage, so how solid do I want them to look, so I can control all of that. Okay, it's all there inside my options, right? Save those settings. Some other bits and pieces that I spoke about. So also, we just turn off these guys. My coordinate system. So you can see my coordinate system there on the screen. Okay, so you can see it's got the colored colors on the axes, just to better indicate which way is which, to differentiate them rather than just the solid brown color that used to be. And another thing is now that I can select or highlight a coordinate system just based on holding my cursor over any part of that, right? So previously you had to make sure you covered over the name to grab that. Now I can grab it from anywhere, okay? Datum points as well. So you can see my datum point over here. It's shown a little bit differently. So again, I've got options for controlling how my datum points appear on the screen. If I go to my entity display, okay, so I'm using the default, which is a cross and a dot, or I can choose to display them in different ways, triangle, whatever it might be. Okay, so I've got some options there for my datum display. So little things, but just worth pointing out because they are there all the time. Okay, all right, but let's look at some actual feature creation. Okay, so let's start with an extrude feature. There's a few things going on here that are new inside 8. So as I said, there's been a bit of a reskinning of the dashboard and how that's laid out, a little bit different to what you might have seen before. But one of the big things is around the panels. Okay, so the what PDC calls the primary panel, the main panel, is now open by default. Okay, so I didn't click to open that up; it just appeared there. Okay, so I can still click through and open up my other panels for these things, my options for my extrude, body options, whatever they might be. But my main panel where I have to select or do something, that will be open by default. Now, if I want to, I can undock that panel as well and place it somewhere else. Okay, so I can also do that for any of the other panels. So maybe my depth panel, I always want that to be open. And you can see as I drag it around, I get those little blue borders show me where the edge is. So I can go and dock that anywhere inside the graphics area. Okay. So I'll go in and I'll start my sketch. You can see all that stuff disappears when I go into Sketcher. So I just put a sketch in here. Okay, out of that, I'm back there. So now I can define my depth options, whatever that I might want that to be. Okay, add taper. Now remember, a lot of that stuff I can just get to through my graphics toolbar, but some people might like to see that more clearly there on the screen. Okay, so I've done all of that. I okay that, there's my feature. But the thing is that Creo will remember those settings. Okay, so I start a new extrude tool now. You can see it's opened up the placement panel. It's in that undocked position, and the options is available. So each of those settings for every feature that you create, it remembers those and it saves them in the .ui file. So if I shut down Creo, fire it up again, come back into the extrude feature, it will remember all of those settings. Okay, so you can really, if you find you're always going to the options panel for certain features, you don't have to click there. You can make that open by default, position it where you want. Every time you create that feature, it'll be there, ready for you to access with less clicking. Okay. So that sort of panel there, that's across all of the features. That's why they popped up in my slide deck before. Okay. So similarly, if I create a whole feature, okay, so again, you can see the placement panels open by default where I have to pick that. So I can pick my hole, define my offset references. Maybe I'll just drag them across like so. But now I want to go into my shape. So again, my shape panel, I could drop that out here, down the bottom like so. So now I've always got my shape panel available whenever I start to create a hole feature. Okay, so I create a hole again now, boom, there they are, right? So a lot of flexibility there on how you want to control your layout. When I roll them back up, I can just click on that icon to reattach them back to where they were. Okay, so a bit of a change there for flexibility around the UI and how you have things laid out. Okay, all right. So that's a little bit on the UI side of it. Let's have a look at some of this design tree stuff that I was talking about. So let's just button. Let me just open up another model here. All right, so I've got my lamp model like so that we've been building. You can see there's a bit of surface construction geometry in there. So a lot of those techniques happening. Here's my model tree, all my things down along here. So um, what's new is I've got this design items folder at the top. It'll be there all the time. Okay. So inside here I can see my bodies. I've also got some customized stuff inside there. So when I'm working within my model tree, okay, there's actually another option, a new option here for filtering things. If I go to my bodies or quilts, I now have the option to show consume bodies or consume quilts inside here as well. Okay, so because my quilts have been consumed, I wasn't seeing them, but now that they're on, I can see them appearing inside my design items section. Okay, so that's a way of sort of grouping things together, right? So it's always there, but what I can do is display this in different ways. So if I want here, I can go and turn on some other things. So I've actually got my layer tree as well. Okay, so previously the layer tree was a toggle between the model tree and the layer tree, like the whole thing changed. What I can do now is I can actually turn the layer tree and it pops out its own thing, okay, down the bottom, kind of like you see in drawing mode. Okay, now some of you might have the config option to set the layer tree as a floating window. Still do that and have that out. But if you are doing that, you might want to have a look at what's new in Creo 8 for this. So with the layer tree, I could go and move that around, maybe position it in there. So now it's side by side with the model tree. Okay, so as I toggle that on and off, it's just coming side by side. So similarly, I can also do things with the design trees. Let me just turn the layer tree off, design tree on, and there's my design tree. Okay, so it takes that design items folder out of the model tree and puts it in its own separate tree. Okay, so I can expand out my design items and see those side by side. So the idea is that I can now pick on these things. If I pick something on the screen, see when I pick on that, it jumps to show me where it is in the design tree, how I've organized that together through my custom organization, but also jumps to that in the model tree at the same time. Okay, so as I said, this is a way to sort of separately arrange and organize how I want to structure and group things together to help me understand and grab them quickly. All right. So with that design tree, again, I can move that out. So actually, when I drag the design tree, you can see I can drag it to the top or bottom of my model tree, just like my layer tree was. I can have it inside the navigator panel, which is what I just did there. So it's part of that navigator panel. So if I close the navigator panel off, they both disappear. Or I could actually drag the design tree out into the graphics area, and then there we go, attach it inside the graphics area. So when I do that, now you can actually see down the bottom of the screen, there's a third option, or sorry, an additional option has appeared there to show the embedded panel that's in the graphics area versus the navigator. So if I close the navigator, the design tree stays open. If I close the embedded panel, that's gone as well. Okay, so I can work with it in that way if you want. Okay, so a lot of flexibility in terms of how you position that on the screen. All right, so while I'm working with this, some other bits and pieces on the surfacing side I talked about. So if I pick on this particular surface here, if I want to go and find the quilt for that, so quilts are now there inside my select from parent. Okay, so you can see I can jump up to my features, but quilts will appear as well. I've also got an option to pin the select from parents. So I can pin that on the screen and leave it there while I'm working through picking things. So if you've got a really deep, long tree, you want to keep that there while you run through to see what's what. You can pin that on the screen while you go through that selection till you get to that point, and then close it down once you've made the selection. Well, so that's not just for surfacing; that's for anywhere whether you're working with the select from parent. Okay, so working with the back to our design tree and what we can do inside this. Okay, so the idea is to let us, as I said, build and help organize that. So you can see here there's actually been some custom folders created already inside this. Okay, so we've got sort of the lamp, we've got our housing, we've got our driving surfaces for that. We've got the design surfaces, so we can pick the different bits and pieces that go into there. But at the moment, a lot of that hasn't been put in. So we can simply take these options that we want, these driving surfaces that we have, these consumed bodies, and we can just drag them down into our custom folder inside the design tree. Okay, so it doesn't change the way you've built the model, the design intent, anything like that. It is purely a visual organization of things to help you group things together to understand what's related to what. Okay, so I can go and work in that way to help me organize that. So another part to working with surfaces in this side is the show snapshots. Okay, so I could go and pick on a surface. Let's say this boundary blend that was here, and if I right click on that, I've got this new option which is to say show a snapshot. Okay, so the idea of that is that boundary blend. It shows me what that boundary blend looked like when it was created at that point in time. So you can see it was actually like kind of like the third feature in the model tree after a couple of sketches. Okay, but obviously that's been consumed. It's been merged and joined and everything else. You can see the merge that's there. But the beauty of this, it lets me see, well, what did this surface look like back in time at when it was first created? Okay, so that's a great way to help you understand what's going on. So maybe I could pick the driving top and show that snapshot there. I could go to the driving uh, bottom, show the snapshot. So you can see I can right click if you've, in my case, I've actually created a keyboard shortcut for it. So it's F4. So I don't need to right click every time. I can just pick on that, F4, F4. So the beauty of this method is it lets me see this is what that surface looked like as I created it while still seeing the finished geometry. So it helps me understand how that was built. Okay. So the typical thing, it's something that I do if I get given a model to look through that use a lot of this techniques. You'll basically unhide all the layers because hopefully it's been put on layers to control it. You'll roll back and you'll go to the model player, roll back to the very beginning and start hitting play, right? And you'll play through and you'll see that surface get created and then you'll see it get consumed. Then eventually the solid will appear from that. But what I don't get with that is the ability to see them both together. Like, what's the finished geometry look like? What did the surface look like when I created it back at that point in time? That's what snapshots are about. Okay, letting me see that there. So Taju, I'm sure a lot of you know Taju, who does a lot of our tooling stuff. He does a lot of surfacing. He thinks this is the best thing in Creo 8, the ability to very easily see, what were my parting surfaces like as I was building them. What was my complex surface geometry like in the part at that point in time while I was starting to build it. Okay, so you also do have the option from that snapshot. You can also create a copy of that snapshot. Okay, so maybe I can go back to that boundary blend as it was there, copy that snapshot to create a new surface at that point. So it actually creates it there in the model tree. It's a copy of that surface, so it's parametrically linked, all the usual things that I can then use to build other features, whatever else I might want to do from that. Okay. So it's really given me a lot of flexibility around how I work with and handle my surfaces and looking back through things in time. Maybe let's just hide that for now. So if I look at, my patterns here, I go to my quilt here again, I can just F4 that. Okay, so I can see the surfaces that we use to basically create those sculpted out ribs that were there inside the model. Okay, just click on nothing and they disappear again. That's a really nice tool for those of you who are working with complex surface modeling. Now, it's not just applicable to surface modeling. Okay, that's where we can see the most use for it, but it's still equally as applicable inside surface modeling, right? Sorry, inside solids modeling. Say. So I can pick on the extrude. I can press F4, and I can see the snapshot. So I can very quickly see, well, that's what the extrude looked like when it was created. Okay, so I can see we start off with a rectangle rather than sort of that sort of doubled up shape there. So we went to the rounds. If we hit F4, I can see them as they came in there. Then the second extrude was created in that way. Okay, so it's a nice way to quickly step through and just see how the model was built, both for solids and surfaces. All right, so that's a bit there on that core stuff. So let's move on, and we'll talk about some of the whole things I mentioned before. So let's open up my front cap here. So let's look at some of the new options that are there in holes. So I can now create the multi-hole. So I can pick on my sketch and say create a hole, and it's automatically defaulted to the sketched as the type because I had that sketch picked. Okay. So the idea is now it's looked at my sketch, and I'm saying how do I want to place the holes. So I can say place them on the endpoints. Maybe I could place them on the midpoints of entities. I could do it on both if I really wanted to. Okay, but I can very quickly create that hole, give it the depth option, make it through all. Okay, and there it is. There's my multi-hole. Okay, so in the model tree, it's one hole feature, right? Referencing that sketch. So it's not multiple individual holes that have been patterned. And look, in this example, you might have said, well, maybe I would have just created one hole and done a ref pattern rather than having to do a sketch. Absolutely, completely valid, right? But what I could have is a much more complex sketch shape to define how I want to do those holes. Okay, so even though it's one hole feature, it still supports reference patterning. So if I come along here, put a chamfer on the edge, let's make that a little bit smaller, 2 mil like so. Okay, I can still go to that feature, pattern that, and I still can do my reference patterning just like I've always been able to do. So even though it's one feature, it still recognizes the multiple elements in there. Okay, so I can still do my reference patterning for both features or components in the assembly if I've assembled a bolt into that hole or a screw or something inside there. Okay, so that's a new multi-hole that's there inside Creo 8. Nice little time saver. On the sheet metal side of things, okay, so just to have a quick look at that. So we've got our new multi flat wall. So let's just edit the definition of this existing flat wall. So I can just come along and control select, multiple references and just build up my flat wall in that way. Okay, so you can see, front bit there. There we go. So add all of them, handles all of my rips there between the walls and bends, and it even handles how even deals with the intersections of those other walls. Have a look at that on the back here. Let's create another flat wall on this guy. So let's put a flat wall up in there. And again, we'll pick our additional edges here, like so. So we can see how we handle the sizing like that. Okay, so I've got some default there. If I want, I can look at my corner treatment options. Again, I can pop them out if I want to see them differently. So I can say for that one, do I want to create it with a seam up the top there? Should that be open or close, a bit of a gap? Maybe I do an overlap like so. If I go to my my miter cuts, sorry, my miter cuts in here. How I could handle that, sorry, my bend allowance, how I handle those settings as well. Okay, so I can define, should it be rectangular, what that cut should look like, maybe I'll stretch that out. Okay, so how I handle all of that, right? So I can define all of that inside that one feature quickly and easily, okay? All right. So last thing I want to look at very quickly was the inseparable assemblies, okay? So let me just get rid of these guys and let's go down into my import. So showed an example of that. So what I've got here is a step file. I'm going to open up. Let's use a template. It's an assembly. So reading that step file, I've been given this step file for a plug. Okay. So I'm going to open that up, create a new assembly out of it, and here it is. Okay. There's my assembly. I can open that up, have a look. I can see all of the parts inside that. But really, this is, this is a purchased in component. I'm never going to want to split this out. I'm working with Windchill. I don't want, all of these individual bits going into Windchill to create WT parts. I don't have to deal with that because I don't purchase those things individually. I'm just dealing with this assembly. So it's simple. I can just right click on that and say, make that inseparable. Okay. I get the warning dialog box I told you about things like support for easy toll and stuff like that. Purchase part, I don't care about any of that. Okay. And now I've got this inseparable assembly. Okay. So you can see in the model tree, it shows me some sort of naming convention to let me know, this is a part, what it belongs to. So it's the part that belongs to this assembly. Okay. So if I go and save that to disk now inside this import folder, okay, so I've saved that. If I go and open up now, the only thing I see in that folder is the .asm file. I don't see individual part files for all of that. Okay. So if you're working outside of Windchill with Creo, you'll just see the .asm file. With Windchill, you'll just see the .asm file, and you'll just have the one WT part for that assembly file, and that's it. Okay. So that's a new inseparable assembly option. All right. So lots of things there inside Core Creo.